All right. So welcome everyone to the Fall 2017 Madison House Advice and a Slice program. My name is Bryce Griffler. I'm the program's chair for the Madison House Alumni Council. Madison House alumni from around the world continue serving their local communities and supporting Madison House. We encourage that continued volunteerism through the Madison House Alumni Network, or MHAN. MHAN is led by a council of dedicated alumni known as the Madison House Alumni Council, made up of two committees, Alumni Development and the Programs Committee. Advice and a Slice is an effort brought to you by the Programs Committee. After graduation, we encourage all volunteers to continue their community service efforts with other Madison House alumni as part of the MHAN network. One other thing that I'd like to mention before we get started is a little bit about the Virginia Alumni Mentoring Program. So signing up for that program, you can link up with a UVA alum for a flash mentoring session, perhaps just to answer one or two quick questions, or for a semester-long mentoring relationship. Mentoring engagements can take place in person, via phone, email, or Skype. Someone that's right for you. So check out alumnimentoring.virginia.edu to see what's available. Go ahead and get into tonight's program. So thank you everyone for being here. Advice and a Slice is our way of bringing Madison House alumni with varying backgrounds and experiences to you, as well as some free pizza. You'll hear from 4 panelists tonight that I'll introduce, and I'll get us started with 1 to 2 questions for each panelist to answer. And at the end, we'd encourage any of the volunteers there in Charlottesville to ask any questions. I know we have a little bit of a light turnout due to weather and midterms, but we're happy to have you anyway. I'm excited to have this posted later. So first, I'd like to introduce Melinda Lim. Graduating in 2010, Melinda is a law associate at Melchioti Marks King LLC in New Orleans. Melinda works as an attorney who specializes in insurance defense. She previously worked as a plaintiff's lawyer, specializing in mass tort and multi-district litigation. Melinda volunteers with Young Leadership Council, where she serves as a mentor to high school seniors applying to college and campaigns for literacy. While attending UVA, she was program director for Madison House Volunteer Legal Aid Program and vice president of membership of Sigma Kappa. Melinda, could you share a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So when I was at Virginia, I majored in foreign affairs and in English literature. And while there, as you said, I was in Sigma Kappa, obviously part of Madison House, now a lawyer after volunteering with the Legal Aid Society. I lived in DC for 2 years, worked with a nonprofit right after college, moved down to New Orleans to go to law school at Tulane, and now I've been practicing for 2 years.
Great, thanks so much. So next, I'd like to introduce Mary Drach. Graduating with degrees in 2011 and 2012, Mary works as a health systems and process improvement analyst at Mount Sinai Health System in New York City. She previously worked as a consultant for the Advisory Board Company, where she led research and consulting initiatives for foundations and development offices within over 200 health systems. Mary recently took a year off to backpack around the world and blog about her experiences. Today, she volunteers with community health centers and free clinics. Mary, could you share a little bit more?
Sure, thank you. So at UVA, I was obviously also in Madison House with the youth mentoring programs, and also did alternative spring break as both a volunteer and then a trip leader and executive board member, and was in the Baden School as well for the public policy program. And recently moved to New York, and I'm starting to learn more about potential volunteer opportunities here, as it's a new city for me still. A lot of the work I had done at the advisory board involved some of that pro bono work with community health centers, which was a great way for me to learn about public health issues and also develop some professional and career related skills.
Great, thanks so much, Mary. So next, I'd like to introduce Tim McGarry, who also graduated in 2011. Tim is a product development manager for MLB Advanced Media. He previously worked in digital media for the Washington Redskins and USA Today. Georgetown Volunteer Network while working on his master's in sports industry management. During his time at UVA, he served as president of Who Crew and was a program director at Madison House. Tim, we'd love to hear a little bit more.
Thank you. So again, I graduated in 2011. I studied econ and history. Outside of class, I was involved with the SoCA and City League basketball programs in Madison House. So wanted to stick with sports when I graduated. Went to Georgetown for grad school, and while there, founded the Georgetown Volunteer Network. When I got to Georgetown, I sort of wanted to find volunteer opportunities and was looking around, and unfortunately, they didn't have anything similar to Madison House where I could easily sign up for things. So I figured other students had similar issues. So I essentially just created a job board of sorts to aggregate different volunteer opportunities in the DC area that then students could then look and find different opportunities based on their interests. Following grad school, I spent some time with the Washington Redskins and then 3 years with USA Today, and then moved to New York in 2015 for a position with Major League Baseball, where I currently work now.
Great, thanks so much. All right, and last, I'd like to introduce Breanna DiGiammarino. Bree is the Senior Director of Social Innovation at Indiegogo in San Francisco. She currently specializes in global crowdfunding for social impact work and sharing best practices to help campaign owners maximize their success and positive impact. While at UVA, she founded Kids Acting Out, an organization that helps kids with limited resources gain access to the performing arts and build life skills through drama. Bree, care to share a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me. At UVA, I was a human bio major, so I combined government and biology in this interdisciplinary major. I wrote a thesis on bioterrorism policy and loved all of my academics. At the same time, I was also really getting engaged with the community, and that started out with Madison House in the Big Brother, Big Sister program. I think my little sister actually fired me at one point, and she said, I think we're done now. So I said, okay, well, this has been a fun couple of years. What else can I do that would really make the most of my strengths and enable me to help people most effectively? So I ended up starting with a colleague at UVA, Kids Acting Out, to engage kids in learning and building life skills through drama. And I loved that and decided to actually continue pursuing that work upon graduating. So at NYU, I went to get a master's of public administration straight away after undergrad, which was a little unusual, but I felt like I had learned a lot about the value of running an organization that is impactful, but needed to know more about how to do it well. So the MPA program helped me to gain those skills. And really ever since then, I've continued to think through these few things whenever I think about an opportunity for my career. I'd say, what can I do well? What do I love doing? And what helps others? So through that lens, I've pursued a few different roles since grad school, moving out to San Francisco right after NYU. And out here, I have been in consulting with nonprofits through Bridgespan, the nonprofit arm of Bain Consulting for strategy and management consulting. And I've also been in social venture, giving funds to nonprofit founders who want to change the world, and have been at Indiegogo for the past 5 years, helping campaigners, mostly nonprofits and social enterprises and individuals who want to change the world, think about how to put their idea online and then raise money, funding from their closest community and then larger communities to move it forward.
Very good. Thanks so much, Bree, for sharing. So I'll start off with a few questions for each panelist. Certainly, if the volunteers down in Charlottesville have any questions or want to interrupt, please do. This is for you. But I'm just getting us started off with some questions just to break the ice, and I'll keep an eye on time and ask the panelists certainly do the same. So we'll start with Melinda, and we'll just go through some of the different panelists. Melinda, why do you think getting involved in the community with an organization like the Young Leadership Council is so important?
Well, after I graduated from law school, I obviously had a little bit more time on my hands, and I definitely wanted to get back into volunteering. I think joining Young Leadership Council is great in New Orleans just because I think it's like 18 to 35 or how old their volunteers are. They have a lot of different kinds of programs. Like the two that I do, one for like literacy campaigning, the other one that helps high school seniors on applying to college. They also have like YLC recycles. They have like, you can mentor 8th graders. So there's definitely like different kinds of interests that are all covered across the board. It's also just a really great way to meet people and give back to the community. I love living here. And so any little way that I can feel like I have a positive change, then I would love to spend time doing that.
Sure, absolutely. And I imagine the panelists and the volunteers in the room can certainly relate. still volunteering with Madison House, trying to make a difference. Absolutely. Thanks. So Mary, the question is for you. What did you observe about volunteerism and community engagement in your travels around the world? Did you have when you returned to the U.S.?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think the main takeaway I got from traveling through 2016 when it comes to volunteerism and community engagement is that it's important to not be volunteering in a vacuum, but really be in a position to try to understand the community that you're working with, understanding their true needs and challenges, and ensuring that, you know, what you're doing with them and for them is truly helping to impact a positive change, and a sustainable change. You know, as a traveler in a lot of developing countries, something that we learned along the road was that it was important to be a mindful traveler in terms of thinking about how what we're doing and how we're spending our money and how we're interacting with the community can really impact the local community. So things like buying local or using, you know, locally run and mindful businesses for different tours we may want to do. And even things like bartering appropriately in the markets so as not to like inflate the prices for the local people. These are all these sort of little things we learned along the road. And something else, this is maybe a little bit more broad again than just volunteering and community engagement, but the importance of being very present in the moment, which I think can apply to volunteering and community engagement too. Again, not taking things for granted and seeing familiar things in a new way even. And I felt like when we came back from our traveling, I was, you know, in my neighborhood and seeing houses and gardens and things like that I had seen for the past 25 years and felt like I was seeing things for the first time.
Very good. I think that's certainly a perspective that could be useful to your point beyond just volunteerism. Tim, as you developed in your career, who has been your strongest role model?
Throughout my career, I've been pretty lucky to have both professional role models, be it bosses or UVA alum who've sort of gone out of their way to take time to answer my questions or guide me along as I make different career choices. So in that regard, I've been really fortunate. But that being said, I also try to look outside of my field for role models, be it like reading biographies or just looking at other inspirational people and what they're doing, just as a guide. Throughout, I think my parents have been strong role models, though, just in terms of they not really professionally in tune with what I'm doing. They probably couldn't describe what I do with product development, but just like their morals and putting people first, I think, are sort of principles that I carry with me throughout different jobs in different cities. So throughout my career, they're probably the strongest role models that I've had.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think that's a common one that we tend to hear, and it makes sense for sure. So Bree, while you were at UVA, you founded an organization, Kids Acting Out, to help children with limited resources gain access to the arts. What did you gain through that experience? And what would you say to current UVA students that may be considering a similar ambitious challenge?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It was super fun to launch Kids Acting Out. It was very nice to have a co-founder because, like many early stage initiatives, there are a lot of challenges that you'll face, and having somebody to work through those with was really helpful. What I found when launching was that there was a lot we could learn really fast, and we iterated quickly in order to make the most impact possible and tailor our model based on that. So, for example, we worked at different levels of education over time to figure out what was the right age group for our programming. And I particularly found the value of testing our model when I went to NYU and launched the second chapter of Kids Acting Out, where the setting was very different. So in Charlottesville, we would drive to the school that we worked with and worked with kids who were coming from the nearby community. In New York, we took the subway, and it took us a lot longer to get to the school that we needed to reach, and the kids were coming from a very different urban setting, and just the way we needed to tailor our programmings to meet the place where the kids were was different, and helped us to learn what about our program needs to be the same in order to have the same impact, and what do we need to change in order to fit the context? And that idea about scaling is something that I have kept with me as I've gone into different jobs and thought about how do you scale impact, and what do you need to know in order to scale impact? And always having that inquiry mindset has been really helpful. From a more interpersonal standpoint, I realized that I just loved inspiring a team to achieve impact, and I've always wanted to work with other people who are like-minded and help to move forward teams. So at NYU, I was able to go to a school, the program there, that was entirely focused around enabling impact. And those folks have also been close friends ever since. And in my career, that's been a consistent thread too. So what would I say to others considering a similar path? I'd say make sure to learn fast and be ready to learn fast. But don't let not knowing something hold you back, because you can learn quickly, and testing and iterating and actually even failing is totally okay, especially here in the Bay Area. We constantly have people starting companies and oftentimes failing. And if you haven't had a failure, it's almost like you haven't tried hard enough. For me, growing up in DC and the East Coast, at least for me, I hadn't quite heard that mentality as much before living here. And it's something that I think is very valuable to think about even when you're still a student. So I'd say be courageous, take risks, and just be willing to learn from those as you iterate to do the best you can in the world.
Great, thank you. And ties right into a shameless plug to make sure that all Madison House volunteers certainly continue their volunteering with the Alumni Network afterwards. You talked about finding those like-minded people who want to make an impact, and those are your people right there, is those people that were all part of Madison House going out after graduation, still certainly like-minded. So thank you. All right, Melinda, back to you. Did you know what you wanted to do with your career path from a young age? And did you have any doubts in yourself as you grew into your career?
I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I think even more specifically, I knew that I wanted to be a litigator. I always wanted to be in the courtroom and go to trial. I think going and working with the Legal Aid Society through Madison House definitely solidified that. I was able to meet a lot of really great attorneys who did a lot of really great work in the community. They gave great advice to this day. I think probably one of the best pieces of advice was to not go to law school right away, take a couple of years and work, and then go to law school. You'll treat it like a job after that, and just have a better perspective, which I now tell everyone who asks me if they should go to law school. So that legacy lives on. In terms of doubts, absolutely. When in law school, super stressful, as are most graduate programs, if not all of them. Taking the bar exam is incredibly stressful. I actually failed the bar the first time that I took it by 9 points, which is, it's like 9 points out of 600 points. So incredibly small amount of points, that was like I think a low point in any attorney's career trying to get up into the legal field. So, I mean, kind of to Bree's point about, failing, like it was fine. It was definitely not fine when it happened. But that happened now, like over a year ago. So obviously I practice now and I'm in a better place, but it kind of gave me more of a drive to succeed, that I would not let that take me down. And now, I work for a great firm that I really enjoy. I enjoy the people who I work for. I like the work that I do. So everything was kind of a stepping stone. And in the end, I think the doubts are there to challenge you, then that you can beat them and prove to yourself that you're actually stronger than you thought you were.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's it's refreshing to hear that, I think is the best term. And I certainly think UVA students appreciate a challenge. So thank you for sharing. So Mary, back to you. You've remained active in your community following graduation and continue to volunteer. What advice would you have to students who want to make sure volunteerism remains part of their post-graduation life? And how do you deal with competing priorities that arise when you're working as a professional?
Yeah, thank you. So definitely I think to have volunteer work be sustainable, especially when there is a lot on your plate, on my plate, everyone's plate, I think it's really important to have something that's driving you to be there, both in terms of the opportunity to make an impact, a significant and lasting impact on a community or cause that you care about, and also something like a personal goal that, like developing a skill or doing something you truly enjoy or learning something new, that also will drive you to be there. Even if like something as simple as you want to be outside or you want to play with kids or you want to learn about a certain topic. I think if you don't have both of those things helping to ground you to your volunteer work or your community engagement work, it'll be a lot more difficult, I think, to show up, especially when more things get added to your plate, work gets hard, personal life gets in the way, and things like that. So for example, when I was at the advisory board, I was really involved with a lot of the pro bono work that the company did. Again, it was a healthcare research and consulting company, and we did a lot of pro bono work as well with different healthcare companies that couldn't necessarily afford our commercial services. And I led a project for 2 years that was helping to develop a new totally pro bono research service for community health centers and free clinics. And I was really excited to be a part of it, not only because I thought that I could really see the potential impact it would have on helping these community health clinics across the country, but I was also excited to be part of it because it gave me great leadership and management experience that I couldn't necessarily get through my regular day job. Basically, I was doing, as the pro bono leader, I was doing the work that my second tier up boss was doing on my regular job. And so again, it was a great experience, both in terms of the potential impact we had, and then also my personal professional development goals to be there. And I am proud to say that we did successfully launch the program and initially had 10 pilot members. And then I left the advisory board soon after we launched. And then when I checked in, earlier this year with the woman who took over the pro bono work, they had expanded to 70 pro bono clients. So I was just really excited to hear about that when I got back to you.
Great, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's kind of like a find your why, establish your why you're doing it. Otherwise, it's kind of aimless as you wander around. I know bringing this whole panel together was not easy, and I certainly appreciate you guys taking the time out of your working professional lives. So thank you. All right, Tim. People often say that networking is of vital importance to success. So what is it about professional and casual networking that you think is beneficial? And how does that tie in with your time at Madison House?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you speak to any career counselor, they'll say that networking is sort of the key to finding jobs. In a lot of regards, I think that's true. Sort of in my experience, a lot of the job opportunities that I've had have come through personal connections, be it with alumni or networking events that I've been able to meet new people and led to new job opportunities. But beyond that, I think networking is also important just in terms of broadening the scope of what you do day to day and your perspective on things. Just like getting out of your comfort zone, finding ways to meet new people, I think just makes you a more well-rounded individual, which goes well beyond just the job aspect of networking. Looking back at Madison House and my experiences there, I think that's one of the big takeaways for me is Madison House really encouraged you to step outside of the UVA circle on a day-to-day basis, which was incredibly valuable looking back on it. And obviously didn't look at it as networking at the time, but sort of building those relationships with other people in the community was networking and definitely helped make me a more well-rounded individual looking back on it.
Great, thanks for sharing, absolutely. And before we started the broadcast, we did talk briefly about reaching outside of our immediate circles and staying away from that tunnel vision, how beneficial that is. So I think we can all agree. Thanks for sharing. All right, Bree, what do you think the future holds regarding alternative sources of fundraising for those seeking to make a positive impact in their communities?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. Indiegogo was founded back in 2008, which was really the early days of crowdfunding in its current form. We like to share the story that back in the 1800s, the base of the Statue of Liberty was crowdfunded by hundreds of thousands of people giving pennies. And so it's not a new idea, but the new version of it is online and with digital payments. So it's very different today. Now, what that has meant in the impact space, I find, is that donors are looking for a few things. One of those is more transparency and where their dollars are going. So a lot of the online fundraising is more specific about where the dollars will go, and donors are looking for opportunities to give where they know where that dollar will go. So for example, in the face of a disaster, I find that a lot of our backers are particularly interested in giving to initiatives that clarify very clearly what kind of supports will go on the ground there, rather than to a general fund that will support an organization known for doing emergency relief. Or even if it's in an organization like that, they want to know exactly what the specific fund will go to and that their dollar can be allocated there. I think this is a benefit and a curse to the impact space, actually, because certainly overhead costs are important. And I think that organizations have good reason to have overhead costs and to allocate funds in ways that they've been doing throughout time. But I think it is also meaning that those organizations are needing to communicate even more than they ever have in the past with their backers. In addition, I think we're seeing an increase in the diversity of recipient organizations for fundraising. So it's really neat that today you no longer have just one organization or a couple organizations doing emergency relief that you can donate to, but by virtue of the online networks that exist and communication routes, you might actually be able to donate to a specific person who needs help. So for example, in the face of the earthquake in Nepal a while back, we actually had thousands of fundraisers launch on Indiegogo and our sister site, generosity.com. Many of these were fundraisers launched by specific individuals who had traveled in Nepal and happened to know a family there whose house had collapsed and needed a few dollars to help build it. So all of a sudden, you're connecting people faster than ever before to have on-the-ground immediate support. So I think these are all really neat opportunities, and hopefully will ultimately lead to an increase in dollars going to impact initiative overall, so that the rising tide lifts all boats and a better fit between donors and the recipient organizations as they know more. And one interesting, just sort of side note I throw out that I think is an area to watch is the equity crowdfunding space. We've recently launched that on Indiegogo about a year ago now, in alignment with the updates to the Jobs Act that enabled anybody, individual, to become an equity owner of a company. So before, you had to be an accredited investor where you had a certain amount of discretionary funding, and that was defined in very specific ways. Today, there are still rules around how much you can give and what that means, but it is open to anybody to make investments in an equity way to companies. So what we've seen on Indiegogo is some really neat momentum there with initially a small number, but a really neat, diverse set of companies raising funds that I think we'll start to see more and more interesting growth in that area as equity crowdfunding becomes a way for many more people to access equity investment in building their businesses that might be hyper-local or have an aspect of impact that didn't make it a fit for traditional venture capital in the past.
Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. I'd imagine yourself and Indiegogo have a lot of really useful data, not just for crowdfunding, but for 501c3s in general, around how they do their fundraising and how they approach their donors and things like that. So thank you for sharing. That's very interesting. So I'm going to turn to our friends down in Charlottesville. I'm going to hope that perhaps maybe a question or two came to mind while you were listening to some of these folks share their experiences, their current professional career, but also the path to how they got there. This is your opportunity to ask kind of the question you've been too afraid to ask about what life has in store for you after college. So do you have any questions for any of these folks?
I personally want to go to law school after I graduate. So, and people have told me before to take a gap year after you graduate. And I think that there's a lot of value in that, but I also think that there's, like, my concern is that I would lose momentum and I would lose the skills that I gained at UVA through like education and studying techniques and other things. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I'm obviously assuming this is for me.
Right.
Yeah, I understand, I guess, like both sides of that You, as a student now, obviously like know how to study, know your study habits, and have probably found your own routine that works really well for you. I will tell you that law school is unlike anything you have probably ever experienced in education. Generally, I mean, all schools are a little different, but when I was in law school, we had one grade. It was one test. It's one exam at the end of the year, which is a lot of pressure. Obviously, everything's graded on a curve, which isn't necessarily true for like every single class that you take in college. I think the benefit in terms of taking a gap year, obviously I'm biased because that's what I did. I think the benefit with that is that when you're working, you kind of get used to a work schedule. You get used to coming in at like 8, leaving at 6 or whatever your hours are at work. And then while you're there, you're super on and can get everything done. And then when you leave, you're done for the day, which I think in law school is really helpful, and probably also in other grad programs, just because there's not really an end to studying, right? Like you could probably sit there and like go over outlines or read things over and over and over again. But it's kind of nice if you in your mind can treat it more like a job than actual school, and be able to focus for a certain amount of time and then be able to kind of like decompress and then be able to do it again, just because it is a lot of information. And there's a lot of things that are just difficult to get used to. I mean, since you're interested in it, I'm sure you've heard like Socratic method is a thing that happens where they just like cold call you in the middle of class and expect you to have read the cases. I think, like obviously ask a lot of other people who are either practicing lawyers or in law school about their thoughts on it. I will say it's only a 3-year program, so it's not like medicine where, like there's just so many years of training, so many years of school. So even if you took 1 year off, 3 years isn't a very long time in the grand scheme of things for education. And I think that more people that I've spoken to who have taken time off before they went to law school actually appreciated that. No one ever really regretted it, I think is probably the big lesson. Does that answer your question, though?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
All right, so I'm going to turn it back to you guys down in Charlottesville. Anything else that comes to mind?
So this is sort of like a more general question and is not really directed at any person, but when you guys sort of looked for your first job after university, like what factors were sort of the most important for you? Because I know like location is a big deal for some people because of where their families are or where they grew up. And for me, my family's sort of all over the place, so I'm not like connected to any location specifically. So when I'm looking for jobs, I kind of can look anywhere. So that doesn't really narrow it down for me, and I'm not really sure like qualities people generally put in front of another when they're looking for jobs.
So any of the panelists are welcome to take this. I know I certainly have an opinion, but I'm going to leave it to the panelists here.
I'm happy to jump in. So for me, I really would think through those key areas that I wanted to make sure any job I had embodied. So I wanted to find something that I was good at and that I enjoyed and that was helping others, and also where I was learning. So that meant for me, I was looking more in terms of sectors. So I did a lot of looking on Idealist when I first was looking for jobs. But then then I chose to go to NYU after UVA, so I ended up not taking any job, of course, although I did have a ton of internships while I was in New York, and that was fun and helped me to learn what I did and did not want to do, actually. So I did a ton of interning. And then coming out of NYU, I initially wanted to take Kids Acting Out National and have that be my whole job. So I was applying for grants in different programs that would help to fund that as a full-time organization. But what I found when applying to Bridgespan, which was a really hard application process and was a traditional consulting style application, was that I figured at Bridgespan I would be able to have the most impact I could in the world, because it was an organization applying very strong methods for strategy and management consulting to some of the toughest challenges out there, and with some of the most interesting clients, at least that I could think of, like the Gates Foundation and even organizations that were public, like different groups in the state of California, et cetera. So for me, it was a lot about the role, but I would definitely say, don't think that there are any barriers to you. Like when I was at UVA, I would often see the comm school having all of these huge recruiting events where students were walking around in suits, and I felt very intimidated by that since I wasn't in the comm school, and I didn't even think really about going into consulting while I was at UVA. But then upon grad school, I really, really wanted to do it and made it happen. And I just would say I could have even done that earlier, I think. Like I could have gone, I don't know if I would have gotten in, but I would just say it's worth trying and don't let anything intimidate you.
Yeah, and something I'll add to what Bria was saying, when I was first looking for jobs out of university, I similarly kind of had key factors that I wanted to hit in a certain job, like potential impact and the work-life culture and things like that, but I was not really sure in terms of field that I was interested in. I had done a lot of work in grad school around gender and workforce issues, and then I kind of randomly applied to this healthcare job at the advisory board. I almost didn't apply to it because I was like, I don't have any healthcare experience. Why would they take me? But they ended up taking me, and I ended up loving healthcare, and that's what I'm doing now still in New York City. And so I guess the key there again is, yeah, don't be afraid, even if something may seem like out of your scope or out of your skill area, it probably isn't. And I don't know if that helps in terms of narrowing things down, but it helps hopefully to just know that there's a lot of options out there. And as long as you're sort of focused on what your key goals are when it comes to a job in terms of what the job and the company entails and also what you want to get out of it, that can definitely be helpful.
Great, thank you, Bree and Mary. So we are kind of running out of time at this point. So I do want to kind of recap a little bit. Panelists shared some interesting sentiments, certainly about kind of being present in the moment, appreciating what you're doing, remembering why you're doing it, appreciating the challenge and understanding that challenge is a good thing. Once you find your why, your reason for doing what you're doing, then you set out to challenge yourself. If it's easy, then you may not be doing something right. So that challenge is what helps you grow. Certainly, we talked a lot about networking outside of your immediate circle and how that will kind of open doors for you. And we talked about moving very quickly and understanding that failing after that challenge presents itself. Failing's okay. Failing in some respects, and apparently in some communities, some cities, is encouraged. So I think that's something good to remember. I'd like to remind you to keep in touch with us, keep in touch with the Madison House Alumni Network. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. I'm going to circle back with the panelists and see if they're okay with me sharing their email addresses in the event that any of the folks who view this video later have some specific questions directed at the panelists, and I welcome you to do that. I also remind the current volunteers there at Madison House to get involved and find a mentor. That Virginia Alumni Mentoring Program is really handy and free, and there's no commitment to it. I speak for the panelists when I say that having a mentor can be incredibly beneficial. So strongly encourage you to check that out if you haven't done so already. The link is in the description box on this YouTube video. So do the panelists have any final thoughts that they'd like to add? All right. Any final thoughts from our friends down there in Madison House?
Hey, Bryce, it's Farhan. I just want to thank you all for all speaking to the students that showed up. I apologize for the small turnout that we had, but I'm really thankful for all the advice that you've given our students, and we'll definitely share this with our students going forward and look to maybe doing this again, possibly with a little more attendance. So thank you all so much.
Great. Thanks so much, Farhan. Thank you so much to our panelists from all over. We have 2 from New York City, 1 from New Orleans, 1 from San Francisco, and I'm right now speaking to you from South Dakota. So we're all happy to be here with you there virtually in Madison House. I know the weather's crummy. I appreciate those of you who did come out. Certainly enjoy the pizza, take some home, share this video with your I was going to say your colleagues, with your friends there at UVA. We look forward to hearing from you soon, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I know. Thank you.